So one of the questions that we get asked a lot is, honing. What should my piston to wall clearance be? And there's a lot more that goes into honing a cylinder than just the piston to wall clearance. So when we bore the cylinder, we use a CNC machine. We bore the cylinders close to size, about 4 or 5 thousandths under the final size, and then what we do is come in and hone it to the final size. So in addition to making the cylinders round and bringing them to the very, down to the 10,000th of an inch to the final size, what we do is we also ensure that they have the proper cylinder wall surface finish. So here we'll take our USB microscope camera here, and we will pull up a picture of what the cylinder walls look like after having just been bored. And you can see the ridges from where the cutter kind of candy canes its way down the cylinder, and you can see that it's just a rough, jagged finish that you wouldn't want to, subject your piston rings to. So we have to hone the cylinders to achieve the proper cylinder wall surface finish. And really, what we want is plateaus and valleys. And the valleys hold oil, helps keeps the rings happy. In a nutshell, the more power, the more boost you make, the more nitrous you have. The more boost you have, the more nitrous you have, the more valley that you need to help hold oil. So now what we're going to do is hone the cylinder to size. We've taken an initial reading just to see what the cylinder walls look like, just for fun, after having just been bored. So we have a few numbers here. We have RK, RPK, RVK, and there's other numbers too that we can look at later, but really your RPK references the peaks of the peaks and valleys that are from the boring and honing. The RK is kind of the median of the meat of the cross section, and then the RVK is the valley. And so right now we're going to finish taking this cylinder closer to size. We've got a couple thousandths left to hone out of this cylinder. We do use a torque plate, and we do that to ensure that the distortion that is applied to the block from the head studs is applied to the block while we're honing, because when we bore the cylinders, they're bored perfectly round. However, when we hone them, if we hone them perfectly round and then we bolt the head to it, the cylinder will be out of round. And so what we do is we have to simulate the torque of the head stud on the on the block. That way we have the distortion in place, and then we hone it round. That way, obviously, when it drives up and down the road, it has the head bolted to it, and so we're sealing a round ring to a round cylinder. Super critical on these engines, 6.0 and 6.4s especially, because they only have 4 large head bolts per cylinder, and so the torque from the head studs will distort the cylinder walls to 3 or 4 thousandths out of round. And so we have customers that call and ask, how much piston to wall clearance should I run? Generally speaking, 3 to 4 thousandths. Well, if you have 4 thousandths of cylinder wall distortion, there's a high likelihood that if you didn't use a torque plate to hone the block with, it doesn't really matter anyway, because you have 4 thousandths of distortion, so you would have no clearance on some parts of the ring and as much as 4 thousandths clearance on other parts of the ring. This is in our roughing cycle now, so we're just trying to take a few thousandths out as quick as we can to get close to our final size. In our machine here, it's a semi-automated, semi-CNC machine. So while the machine's running, it's sensing the taper of the cylinder, and so you'll see that it'll dwell from time to time. If it senses that the cylinder is starting to get taper or tight spots in it, hourglass shape, it will stop and sense that and dwell there to help make the cylinders perfectly straight. So to achieve the proper surface finish and to achieve the proper peaks and valleys that we're after, it'll actually take 3 different sets of stones. And so we'll start, this is a 150 grit stone on this particular block. Certain blocks will take different stones, but on this block we take a 150 grit stone, and that's what's going to cut. It'll cut pretty much to size, but that'll leave really deep valleys and really tall peaks. We really don't want tall peaks, so we're going to come back and knock the peaks off and give us plateaus with like an 800 grit, and then we'll come back with what we call a plateau brush. So these stones are a diamond stone. Then we'll chase that with an 800 grit, what they call a vitrified stone, which is kind of a classic, traditional stone that they used for decades before the diamond stones came out. And then we'll chase that with a plateau brush. You can see the plateau brush is really just a bunch of nylon bristles with an abrasive built into it. And what this does is a diamond is a cutting stone. It's a cutting tool. as we use in some of our other resurfacing jobs and stuff. And so when a diamond cuts, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't cut like a knife through butter. It actually rips, and so we don't want to have a rough, jagged, ripped surface. So what the plateau brushes do is kind of smooth some of that ripped material off and give you the nice smooth peaks and valleys that we're after. We've already checked our cylinders with our dial bore gauge, and so we'll know that once we get to, we had about 5,000, 6,000s to hone out, and so once we get down to, the last little bit, the machine will go into a finishing mode. Gives us a little bit straighter cylinder wall, and then we'll check to see if we're close to our final size. So this one still has 3,000s to go. So in this case, we would continue honing until we got all the way to, within about 1/10 of a thousandths under our final size. Also, it's important to, keep the block temperature in check, because when you're honing, obviously there's friction. The cylinders will grow, and so, sometimes it'll take a couple of hours to hone the block to size, let it cool down, it'll shrink back up. We hone it back to size again, and they'll shrink back up, and it takes a few processes, a few iterations of doing that to get everything to come out to exactly the final size, and we final check it on our assembly stand. So once we get to final size, within about a 10,000th of an inch, a couple tenths away from our final size, we'll change from our 150 grit stones to, and these are numbered, we have to keep them in order. We'll change out to our 800 grit stones. This is kind of like a cake recipe, it takes different hardness blocks. We'll take kind of a different recipe of what grit stones to use to achieve the desired surface finish. You can't really just pick one size or one stone grit and say, I'm going to use that, on all engines. If this was a 1970s, small block Chevrolet where the cast iron is a lot softer than that of a modern diesel block, we wouldn't need to use as aggressive of a stone for our initial, our initial sizing. On the diesel blocks, they have a lot higher, people talk about nickel, but a lot harder material. And the later model blocks, the new Cummins blocks and the 6.7 Ford blocks, are a CGI block. They were very, very hard. So the goal here is not to remove a tremendous amount of material. We're just trying to get the proper surface finish, the proper texture on the cylinder walls now. So now we're going to take it out of rough mode, we're going to go to finish mode, turn auto finish off, and we'll turn auto dwell off, because right now I want to be in control and make sure that we get exactly the surface finish that we're looking for. So in this case, this is where I say the recipe that it takes to, trying to get our stones out to size here. All right, so now we'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 strokes with the 800s. And on some blocks, that's the recipe that we found for 6.4 liters that works well. On some blocks, it might only be, 4 strokes of the 800s. And so, that's where sometimes all the CNC and automation is great, but sometimes it also takes a little bit more time, and hand checking to actually achieve the desired result that we're looking for. So now we'll switch out from our 800s, and we'll switch out to our plateau brushes. But before we do that, we'll take another peek with our camera, and we'll check out the difference between a rough bored cylinder, a rough honed cylinder, and now a really close to being finished honed cylinder. And then we'll check out the final result here at the end. So our tool that we use for this is called a profilometer. So it measures the profile of the cylinder wall, and it's from a company called Mitutoyo. They're kind of the standard. It's what a lot of companies have used for years and years. And you can tell visually the difference too, just looking, at the cylinder walls. So you can see the difference in the cylinder wall, just visually from a cylinder that's been bored here versus one that has been honed. And so you can see that has the crosshatch that everyone talks about. You can see the difference between the crosshatch that's in the cylinder there versus one that's just been rough bored. So this has no crosshatching in it. This just has kind of the candy cane from the cutter. We'll fire our computer back up, and we will go back to our USB microscope camera here. And so again, here's a cylinder that has just been bored, and you can see the rough marks here, the lines, the horizontal lines on the cylinder. That obviously wouldn't be conducive to a very good ring seal. Here you can tell a cylinder that has been roughed with 150 grit stones and then finished with the 800 stones, the 800 grit vitrified stones for just 6 swipes, and so it makes a really sizable difference there. And now what we'll do is come back and finish that with our plateau brushes, and then that cylinder will be all done. So again, here we're going to count 1, 2, 3. This is kind of where our cake recipe comes into play again, because, you know, 1 or 2 strokes too many or too few will radically change the surface finish. So again, we have peaks and valleys, and we want, generally speaking, for race car stuff, you know, more boost, more nitrous, we want deeper valleys, and that's going to hold more oil. The oil is what keeps the rings alive. Without enough valley, you know, the hone job that you would put on a Honda Civic that runs really tight piston to wall clearance and doesn't see any, you know, doesn't see 90 pounds of boost, doesn't need as much valley. So now we'll pull up our USB microscope and we'll take a picture again, and you can tell compared to what we had before, there's a little bit more of a plateau in between the valleys. And then to actually quantify that, we use our profilometer. So our profilometer has this teeny needle point there. It's kind of like the needle on a record player, and what we're doing is this drags that needle across the cylinder wall, and that's going to give us a reading of the profile of the cylinder wall. And so that little teeny needle there is what gives us our data. Get our software booted up. And so this software came from our friends over at Total Seal, and if you follow Lake Speed and those guys, they have a lot of great content on ring seal, cylinder wall surface finish. I mean, it's not uncommon to see engines pick up, you know, 50 plus horsepower with proper ring seal, or alternatively lose 50 plus horsepower without proper ring seal. And so, you know, this is what helps keep your engine alive, whether you're, you know, towing a trailer or, you know, trying to make 2,000 horsepower. You know, the cylinder wall surface finish might be a little bit different from one application to the other, but ultimately it does still have to be correct. And so we test every block. Every block will get a printout, a readout that goes with all the engine documentation. It's kind of like a birth certificate for the engine. Just helps us document and make sure that we're, you know, we're within our tolerances. And so here you can see our RPK single digit. Our RK is 16 and our RVK is 25. So in this case, we would actually re-hone. We would go back to the 150s to try and get more RVK in it. Sunnen is our honing manufacturer of choice. They've been a staple in the rebuilding industry for, don't quote me on this, but I believe close to 100 years, maybe more now. I've had the privilege of touring Sunnen in St. Louis, Missouri, and they employ hundreds of people here in the United States, and they've developed the stones, actually make the stones and the media themselves. They make all the machining shoes here, and we use pretty much exclusively Sunnen honing equipment. We use their equipment for our rod hone, our line hone, our cylinder hone, our valve guide hone, lifter bore hone, all comes from Sunnen. Hear how it sounds now. You can hear when it's on a cylinder that's just been bored. I don't know, you can hear the stones on the surface finish of the rough bored cylinder, and as it hones, that'll go away. All right, so now we'll do a few strokes with the brushes, and that will give us the desired surface finish. We'll check again to be sure. We'll take our profilometer. This is a cool fixture a place called QMP makes. So instead of having to hold the thing and not shake, it's actually a nice little fixture they make. And so you can see right now the peaks and valleys as it drags the needle across the cylinder wall. You can see it's picking up the lines here are the valleys, and then the top is the plateau. So what we want to see is plateau, plateau, valley, plateau, plateau, valley. And so we look pretty good here. So once it's done, it'll spit out our numbers here, and we'll see what we got. So this looks pretty good. Let's see, we have a pretty good knee here. What we call the knee, or this is your material ratio. So this would be like taking slicing a mountain in half, and you can see where the mountain meets the plateau, and then this is our valley. And so here we have our RK in kind of the white area there, our RVK in the blue, and our RPK in the red. And so this would be a pretty good cylinder wall surface finish for a stock replacement, maybe a lightly modified engine, and years of service, good break-in, and that's what we're looking for. And then the last thing we'll do, now that we know that our numbers are right, we'll pull out our USB microscope again, and we'll see what the final product looks like. And so we can see we have good valleys, we have good plateaus, everything looks good, and we can actually put on here, we can check and make sure that our angles are actually what we thought they were. So we use a 34-degree angle. Let me see, we're 34.7, 35, so we're 34.3. So our angles look good. The angles in the machine, when it's honing, they're calculated based on the speed of the spindle and how many strokes per minute. And so this is always a good way to double, triple check everything that we do to ensure that we're actually getting the desired surface finish that we think we're getting. It's everything that goes into honing a block here, and from here the block will go on to our line honing department, then it'll go on to our final cleaning and inspection department, and then up to assembly, where we'll kind of double, triple check everything that we did back here in the machine shop.